Hello everyone, I will be reviewing some important social psychological theories. This video will be divided into two, so let's start the review part 1. So first, let me remind you the definition of social psychology. This is the branch of psychology that studies how others influence our thoughts, feelings, and actions. It also studies group and intergroup phenomena. Now let's start by reviewing some theories on social cognition. So what is actually social cognition? Social cognition is defined as how we think about and interpret ourselves and others. So basically, it's all about how we perceive ourselves and other people, how we judge ourselves and other people. One of the most important theories in social cognition is attributions. Attribution is a social cognitive approach to describing the ways a social perceiver uses information to generate causal explanations, basically how we explain our own and others' actions. There are at least two most important biases in attributions that we tend to fall into. The first one is the fundamental attribution error, or FAE. This is the tendency of observers to overestimate the influence of internal dispositional factors on a person's behavior, while underestimating the impact of external situational factors. So for example, when we see one of our classmates come late to the classroom, then we tend to just conclude that, okay, this person must be lazy. That's all. So we tend to overestimate that his lateness is due to his personal characteristics. But what we don't know is that the other situations, maybe he had a flat tire, maybe he had something to do, maybe he was helping his parents. So these other situational factors that we did not consider whenever we try to explain other people's situations or other people's behaviors. But why do we tend to fall into this trap to the fundamental attribution error? Because first, there is this people's enduring personality traits. So we tend to conclude that that people's personality traits is something that's pervasive. It's long lasting, and there's also our tendency to take cognitive shortcuts. So the easiest way to explain other people's behavior is just explain it using any personal characteristics, because we have no enough information about the situations that this other person actually experienced. And another thing is that saliency bias. What is the most salient? What is the clearest thing, the clearest factor? Okay, someone comes late, might be lazy. That's all. Because again, we have no enough sufficient information about the other situational factors that this person might actually experience. Another bias of attribution that we tend to fall into is the self-serving bias. This is a type of attributional bias in which people tend to take credit for their successes and externalize or deny responsibility for their failures. Basically, whenever we achieve something, we will say that, oh, it's because of me, because I put lots of efforts in it, or because I'm smart, I'm genius. But when we fail, we don't want to put that responsibility into ourselves. We would try to find something else, like, oh, I'm just not lucky, or it was too noisy in the classroom, so I could not concentrate on the exams, or the materials were so hard that I could not that it was too hard for me to study, so that's why I failed in the exam. So that's a self-serving bias. Next is attitudes. Attitudes is basically any of our opinions about something, about a particular thing. there are explicit attitudes and there are implicit attitudes. The explicit attitudes are the attitudes that we are aware of it. We're so conscious about it. Maybe when someone asks you about president candidate, for example, during the last presidential campaign, then you might have, you might show your explicit attitude. Which one that you wanted to choose in the election. But there is another thing, another type of attitude, that's implicit attitude, and sometimes we are not even aware about this. We're not even aware about this attitude that we have inside ourselves. So, for example, it's gonna be related to the other theories like the prejudice, implicit prejudice. So sometimes we might have like a particular attitudes about a specific group, and we think we don't have it. We think we are fine with them. We think we don't have negative attitudes towards them. But the way we behave, maybe it's actually displaying some negative attitudes towards a particular group. For example, maybe we're avoiding making friends with these particular groups, or we associate them with some type of negative traits or characteristics without us even being aware of it. We learn attitudes through direct instructions. We see maybe our parents say something about a particular thing, a particular phenomenon. Personal experiences, because we might experience something, something joyful, something pleasant or unpleasant that affect our attitude. And observation, we can see other people respond towards a particular situation or a particular thing or particular group or anything else. So how does attitude affect behaviors? So sometimes we have attitude that is consistent with our behavior. So it's depending on the attitude extremity, attitude certainty, and personal experience. If you are so extreme about your personal opinion about something and you're so certain about it, and your personal experience showed you that this is maybe beneficial for you or making you happy, then it makes your attitude about this particular thing stronger. And if this attitude is also accessible, then you will do something that's consistent with your attitudes. For example, you have the positive attitude towards jogging. For example, jogging every morning, you have a very positive attitude about it, for example, and you are really you are so into it, you're so fanatic about I have to jog every single morning, and you're so certain about the benefit of this activity for your health and maybe for your psychological health, your physical health. And from your personal experience, yes, you experienced it, that every time you jog you feel happy, and whenever you miss one day of not jogging, you feel so sad and tired, exhausted the whole day. So you are so sure you have that that jogging every morning is really important for you, and you have a very strong attitude about jogging every morning, and you keep thinking about it, like every morning you put alarm to wake up early in the morning to jog, and you keep thinking about it so that your attitudes are accessible. Then every single morning you will do this behavior that's consistent with your attitude for jogging. So you will jog every morning. So that's how attitude affect behavior. But what happens when we have an attitude that is discrepant from our behavior? Here we will experience what's called as the cognitive dissonance. This is basically the unpleasant tension and anxiety caused by a discrepancy between an attitude and a behavior. And we have a very strong desire to reduce this tension and anxiety. So we have a very strong desire to reduce this dissonance. So When you have a strong reasons for engaging in attitude discrepant behavior, then your dissonance is weak, then there is no attitude change. So for example, in that jogging example, if there's one morning you were ready, like you woke up very early in the morning and you were preparing yourself, you're getting ready for your morning jogging, and then suddenly someone who is really important to you called you asking for help for something, and then that stopping you from doing your routine jog that morning on that morning. So instead you were leaving your house and going to this person's house and doing something else instead of jogging. So in that case, the dissonance it might be weak, so you may not think about the unpleasant tension and anxiety. So there is a possibility of changing your attitude about jogging. So you will be like thinking like, oh, um, okay, then maybe jogging is not as important, but because the dissonance is weak, you don't need to change your attitude because you know that the next day you might be able to jog again. But on the other hand, when you have very weak reasons for engaging in attitude discrepant behavior, so someone who called you might be someone who is not so important, but this person like begs you like for life, like please, 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 please come. And then you, instead of jogging, you go to this person's house, and then you miss that one day of jogging. The dissonance might be strong. Yeah, so then you will be thinking that you will try to reduce the unpleasant tension and anxiety that is produced because you're missing that your routine morning jogging activity that you feel so important and that you have very strong attitude about. So what you can do in reducing the dissonance is that you might actually change your attitude about jogging. You might actually say that, okay, that's fine, that's fine. Missing one day of jogging is okay, So and then maybe the next morning when someone else calls you for help, then if you miss your morning routine of jogging again, then you will feel okay because you have solved that that cognitive dissonance. You have reduced the tension, anxiety. You have solved. You have found a balance between your tension and what you're actually doing. So yeah, so basically the cognitive dissonance is when you experience discrepancy between your attitude and behaviors that actually might change your attitude about something. So that and the way to reduce the cognitive dissonance could be by actually changing your attitude about that particular thing that you have very strong feelings, strong attitude about. So next, let's talk about social influence theories. This is how situational factors and other people affect us. So one of the most important theories of social influence is conformity theory. So you might remember about Solomon Asch's study of conformities with the lines, where the real participants followed the majority of the people in the room, even though they were actually Confederates, even though they were saying the wrong answer, but many people followed or conformed to the majority of the group in that room. So the next question is, why do we conform? The first one is because of the normative social influence. This is conformance to group pressure out of a need to be liked, accepted, and approved by others. So for example, we might be dressing up in a certain way because our friends are doing the same. So we want to be liked or accepted in that group of friends. Second one is the informational social influence. This is the conformance to a group out of the need for information and direction. So for example, if we go to a store to buy a laptop or a smartphone, and we might ask to the store attendant, because we trust in their opinion, like which one is the best. And the third one is reference group. So this is conformity, because the people we conform to or go along with because we like, admire, and want to be like them. So for example, nowadays, many youth are so crazy with like the Korean artists, actresses and actors, and then they dress up and they do their makeup based on these popular figures. Next is obedience theory. You remember about Stanley Milgram's study of obedience, right? Where they shocked people. Yeah. So the question of the Stanley Milgram study of obedience at that time was that will participants assigned as teachers obey the experimenters' comments to shock the learners for wrong answers? So before they conducted this study, they actually surveyed regular people through the newspaper. So 25% of people surveyed said that they would shock past 150 volts. So only 25% of the people being surveyed. But in reality, in the laboratory settings, 65% of participants actually obeyed completely and delivered shocks to XXX level, like the highest level, not only 150 volts, but even higher than that, 65%. So there is discrepancy between these two results. The question is then, why did participants follow orders? Why do we follow other people's orders? First reason would be legitimacy and closeness of authority. So the more legit the authority of the person who's giving us commands, the more likely that we would follow their orders. And the closeness of the authority. So if that person is giving orders in front of us, then we would likely to follow their orders compared. We would likely to follow their orders. But when they are far away, if they give us orders through the phone, for example, so the possibility becoming to be lower. And then the next one is the remoteness of the victim. So the closer the victim to the teachers, and in Milgram's study, the less likely that the teachers provided, like gave the shock, passed to like 150 volts. But when the victim was remote, like far away from the participants, from the teachers at that time, then the more likely that they will shock these students, quote unquote students, the fake students, past 150 volts. And then assignment of responsibility. When the participants, the teachers, were assigned to do the shock themselves, then they were less likely to shock more, to shock the students more, compared to when there is another person in the room, and then the teachers, the participants, can assign that responsibility to someone else. Like, okay, give me a shock, like. Then when he can assign that responsibility to someone else, then this person, the teachers, the participants, were more likely to give the shock past 150 volts. Modeling or imitation of others. When they are seeing other people doing following orders, then they will also imitate. But when they are seeing other people disobeying the orders, they will also imitate. And probably the same with us. socialization to the authority figure. So what's very interesting in Milgram's study is that the authority figure was just an experimenter wearing a white lab coat. And because we are so used to seeing white lab coat as, sort of like authority figure, this person might be doctor or at least someone who has advanced degree, then we tend to think about them in a respectful way, that we see that okay, they must know something, they know what they're doing, they will not kill people, like something like this. So we just trust them and then we follow their orders. Foot in the door technique is an initial small request that was used as a setup for a later larger request. So the participants followed orders because the request was given like small by small. First, like okay, first it's like 25 volts and then 50 volts, and then increase, and then until the larger request and the largest one. But if it was given like directly 450 volts, maybe they will directly disobey the orders. But because the experimenters used the foot in the door technique, then participants obeyed their order. There's also this relaxed moral guard. So evil doesn't always look evil. That we see it sometimes. We sometimes we cannot believe that how could this person do something really horrible like that, because we just trust people who just look cute and look they just don't look as a bad guy, they look like a nice guy. So there's a kind of relaxed moral guard. Whenever we see someone who looks nice, then we just trust them because we just trust them because they don't look evil. Unfortunately, evil doesn't always look evil. This is the truth. Yeah. So sometimes we're just following orders from someone who looks nice, but the orders is actually for doing something that may be unnecessary or harmful for other people, but because we think that this person is too nice to do those harmful behavior, then we're just following the orders. Next, let's talk about group processes. Remember Zimbardo's Stanford prison study? This was a 2-week study at Stanford where half of the participants were assigned the role of guard and the other half were assigned the role of prisoner. And the two groups just really took the role seriously. The study was stopped after only 6 days because the guards, because they took their role really seriously, they abused their role of power. And the prisoners also suffered severe psychological responses. Why this happened in group? Because there is this de-individuation process. This is the reduced self-consciousness, inhibition, and personal responsibility that sometimes occurs in a group, particularly when members feel anonymous. So we might be wondering why there are so many like violence that was or aggressive behaviors that are conducted by a group of people, because these people feel anonymous. They feel that other people will not look at them as them personally, but they will just look at them in as a group, inside a group. So if they do something bad, they feel as if they will not be blamed personally, but they will be blamed in like the group will be blamed, but not them as individual. That's what they thought, because they just feel anonymous. Group members also make decisions as a group. So there are at least two phenomena that are related to group decision making. The first one is the group polarization. This is the tendency for groups to make decisions that are either more extreme, yeah, either riskier or more conservative, depending on the member's initial dominant tendency. If the member's initial dominant tendency were in the extreme side, then the tendency is that the group will make a decision that it's even more riskier. But if the group members were already like more conservative, like for example, you're trying to decide whether in this pandemic time, whether you would want to go in a group to a kind of like a tourism area, and then if many of you many of the group members believe that let's just risk it, let's just do it, we just want to go together, stay together, and like we have had no vacation in the last 6 months, and we just want to go out together. And then if many group members believe in this and they wanted to take this risky option by just going out to a very crowded tourism place, even though there's one or two minority, one or two group members who said no, don't go there, no, don't do that, no, we cannot, we need to stay at home. But if majority, the dominant members initial tendency was just they wanted to just go out, then most likely that the group will take this riskier decision. Another phenomenon is groupthink. This is the faulty decision making that occurs when a highly cohesive group strives for agreement, especially if it is in line with the leader's viewpoint and avoid inconsistent information. So the group thing, usually the group would follow a very charismatic and strong leader, especially when they are a very cohesive group, like a family, like a family group, and they have like the dominant group member in that family group, and then we just follow whatever the leader says. But even though the decision that the leader is going to take might actually not correct, or might be risky, or a bit harmful for the other group members. But so that's why it's called the group thing. Like this is the faulty decision making that occurs by following a very charismatic or strong leader in that group. So that's it for the review part 1 of the social psychological theories. We will review the social psychological theories again in part 2.